Queen Fornax of the Saurian Empire slithered into her private chamber, her scales glistening in the dim light as she approached the human soldier Jake Bell. Her eyes locked onto his muscular form, seeing not a prisoner of war, but the key to her species' evolution. Jake stood rigid, his jaw clenched as the reptilian monarch circled him. The air in the hidden room aboard her massive warship crackled with tension. He knew why he was here, and the thought both repulsed and intrigued him. "You understand the terms, human?" Fornax hissed, her forked tongue flicking between sharp teeth. Jake nodded, his voice a low growl. "Better treatment for the other prisoners. That's the deal." The Queen's personal guards had escorted Jake from the crowded prison block to this opulent chamber. Now, only Dr. Zex, the Saurian chief scientist, remained with them. The doctor busied himself with an array of medical equipment, preparing to collect genetic samples and monitor vital signs. Fornax dismissed her attendants with a flick of her tail. As the door sealed shut, Jake felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine. He was alone with the alien queen and her scientist, about to participate in a clandestine breeding program that could change the course of the war. The conflict between humans and Saurians had raged across the stars for years. Fornax's empire had conquered multiple human colonies, but Earth's military continued to resist. Jake had been captured during a failed assault on a Saurian outpost, his exceptional physical traits catching the Queen's eye. As Fornax approached, Jake struggled to quell his revulsion at her alien physiology. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent quality, and her movements were fluid and predatory. Yet beneath the reptilian exterior, he sensed an intelligence that both awed and terrified him. Dr. Zex stepped forward, instruments in hand. "We will begin the procedure, Your Majesty." The breeding act that followed was clinical and emotionless. Jake focused on thoughts of Earth, of the human captives he was helping, anything to distract from the bizarre reality of his situation. When it was over, Fornax immediately retreated, her expression unreadable. As the guards led Jake back to his cell, the Queen's words echoed in his mind. "Speak of this to no one, human. Your silence ensures your survival and that of your fellow prisoners." In the days that followed, Fornax began experiencing unusual physical changes. She summoned Dr. Zex, ordering him to accelerate the program and bring more human subjects aboard. Unbeknownst to her, the Saurian king grew suspicious of her frequent private meetings and assigned spies to monitor her activities. Meanwhile, on Earth, military intelligence detected increased Saurian activity near the sector where Jake's unit was lost. A covert rescue mission was launched, its participants unaware of the true nature of the Saurians' interest in human prisoners. As whispers of the breeding program spread among the captives, tensions rose. Some saw it as a chance for survival, a way to ensure better treatment. Others viewed it as the ultimate betrayal of humanity, a line that should never be crossed. Jake lay in his cell, grappling with guilt and fear. He knew he must keep the encounter secret to protect himself and his fellow prisoners. But as he closed his eyes, he couldn't shake the image of Queen Fornax's calculating gaze. What had he set in motion? And how would it change the fate of both their species? Jake's nights were haunted by the memory of his encounter with Queen Fornax. As he lay on his hard bunk in the crowded cell, he couldn't shake the image of her alien form or the weight of his decision. The other prisoners, once distant and wary, now looked to him with a mix of curiosity and newfound respect. Whispers of better treatment had spread, and Jake found himself at the center of a growing web of speculation. One evening, as the ship's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, a fellow captive named Marcus approached Jake's bunk. "We need to talk," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously to the guard stationed at the cell entrance. Jake nodded, following Marcus to a secluded corner where a small group had gathered. Their faces were a mixture of hope and willpower. A woman named Elena spoke first, her voice barely audible. "We've been watching. Guards are distracted. Something's happening with the lizards, and we think you know what it is." Jake's heart raced as he realized the implications of their suspicions. He weighed his options carefully before responding. "You're right. There's more going on here than just imprisonment, but we need to be smart about this." Over the next few days, Jake found himself reluctantly stepping into a leadership role. The prisoners began to organize, sharing information and resources. They created a crude map of the ship's layout based on their limited movements and overheard conversations. Jake's military training proved invaluable as he taught them basic hand signals and covert communication techniques. Meanwhile, in her private chambers, Queen Fornax examined her reflection with growing alarm. Her once smooth scales now had patches of soft, pinkish skin. She ran a hand over her arm, marveling at the new sensation. Dr. Zex hovered nearby, his instrument scanning her constantly. "Fascinating," the scientist muttered. "The human DNA is integrating at an unprecedented rate. Your Majesty, we must accelerate our research. We need more subjects." Fornax nodded, her mind racing with the possibilities. "Bring me the human named Jake," she commanded, "and increase the number of breeding pairs. We're on the verge of something extraordinary." As Jake was escorted to the Queen's chambers once again, he noticed subtle changes in her appearance. Her movements seemed less reptilian, more fluid. When she spoke, her voice carried an unfamiliar warmth. "You've done well, Jake," Fornax said, circling him slowly. "Your fellow humans are thriving under the new arrangements. But I need more from you, from all of you." Jake tensed, sensing the shift in her demeanor. "What exactly are you planning, Your Majesty?" Fornax's eyes gleamed with excitement. "A new future, a bridge between our species. Can't you see the potential?" Their conversation lasted hours, delving into the complexities of human and saurian societies. Jake found himself drawn in by the Queen's vision, even as part of him recoiled at the implications. Back in the holding area, Jake's absence had not gone unnoticed. The resistance movement had grown bolder, with prisoners discreetly sabotaging equipment and gathering intelligence. They had managed to intercept fragments of transmissions from Earth, learning of an impending rescue mission called Operation Prometheus. Elena approached Jake upon his return, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where were you? We intercepted something big. Earth is coming for us." Jake's mind raced, torn between his loyalty to his fellow humans and the complex emotions stirred by his interactions with Fornax. "We need to be ready," he said finally, "but we also need to understand the full picture. Things are changing fast." As the days passed, tensions aboard the ship escalated. King Draconis, growing increasingly paranoid about his wife's behavior, intensified his efforts to uncover her secrets. General Serpens moved through the ship like a shadow, interrogating crew members and piecing together the truth about the breeding program. Dr. Zex's lab became a hive of activity, with more human subjects brought in for experimentation. The hybrid embryos he created showed remarkable potential, adapting and evolving at an astonishing rate. Jake found himself caught in the middle of it all, struggling to balance his role as a resistance leader with his growing connection to Queen Fornax. Their meetings became more frequent, evolving from clinical sessions to deep discussions about their respective worlds. One night, as Jake lay awake planning the Resistance's next move, an alarm blared through the ship. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors. Operation Prometheus had begun, and the human rescue team had breached the Saurian defenses. In the chaos that followed, Jake rallied the prisoners. They used their makeshift weapons and knowledge of the ship's layout to fight their way towards the human insertion point. But as they neared their potential rescuers, Jake hesitated, thinking of Fornax and the complex web of relationships and possibilities he would be leaving behind. The ship shuddered under the assault, and Jake knew that the next few moments would determine not just his fate, but potentially the future of both species. With a deep breath, he made his decision and plunged into the fray, the sounds of battle echoing all around him. The chaos of battle enveloped Jake as he led the prisoners through the corridors of the Saurian warship. Alarms blared, and the acrid smell of weapon discharge filled the air. He motioned for the group to halt, pressing himself against a wall as a squad of Saurian guards rushed past. "This way," Jake whispered, guiding the humans toward the cargo bay, where he suspected the Earth rescue team would breach the hull. His mind raced, torn between the promise of freedom and the complex web of relationships he'd formed aboard the ship. As they navigated the labyrinth of passages, Jake's comm device buzzed. He recognized the encrypted signal. It was from Queen Fornax. Hesitating for a moment, he answered. "Jake, where are you?" Fornax's voice carried an edge of panic. The ship is under attack. You must come to my chambers immediately." He glanced at the expectant faces of his fellow prisoners. "I can't. We're—" "Please," she interrupted. "It's urgent. What we've started, it's bigger than either of us realized." Jake's heart raced. He turned to Elena, his second in command. "Get everyone to the rendezvous point. I have to take care of something." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Jake, what aren't you telling us?" "Trust me," he said, already backing away. "I'll meet you there." Jake sprinted through the ship, dodging debris and panicked crew members. He arrived at Fornax's chambers, breathless, to find the Queen pacing nervously. Her appearance shocked him. Patches of smooth pink skin had replaced many of her scales, and her posture seemed almost human. "Your Majesty," Jake gasped, "what's happening to you?" Fornax approached him, her movements fluid and alien, yet strangely familiar. "The human DNA, it's changing me, Jake, and not just physically." She placed a hand on his arm, the touch sending an electric current through his body. "My thoughts, my feelings, they're evolving. I see things differently now. I see you differently." A loud bang interrupted them as the door to the chamber burst open. General Serpens stood in the doorway, his reptilian eyes blazing with fury. "Treachery," he hissed. "I knew you were hiding something, my queen, but this is beyond imagination." Jake instinctively moved to shield Fornax, but she gently pushed him aside. "Serpens, you don't understand. This could be the key to ending the war, to uniting our species." The general's tail lashed angrily. "Uniting? You speak of abomination. This ends now." He raised his weapon, aiming it at Jake. In a blur of motion, Fornax lunged forward, her partially transformed body moving within human speed. She knocked the weapon from Serpens' grasp and pinned him against the wall. "I won't let you destroy what we've built," she snarled. Jake quickly retrieved the fallen weapon. "What do we do with him?" Fornax's expression hardened. "Take him to the brig. We can't risk him informing the king." As Jake escorted the subdued general away, alarms blared throughout the ship. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention all personnel. Human vessels detected on long-range scanners. Battle stations." Jake's blood ran cold. The covert rescue mission was about to become a full-scale assault. He locked Serpens in a holding cell and raced back to Fornax's chambers, his mind blown with the implications. He found the Queen in deep discussion with Dr. Zex, who was gesticulating excitedly over a holographic display. "Your Majesty," the scientist exclaimed, "the hybrid embryo is developing at an astonishing rate. Its genetic structure is unlike anything we've ever seen." Fornax turned to Jake, her eyes shimmering with a mix of emotions. "This changes everything. If we can show both sides the potential of our combined DNA, perhaps we can stop this war before it escalates further." Jake stared at the hologram, mesmerized by the image of the developing hybrid. "But how? The human fleet is almost here, and your people still see us as the enemy." Dr. Zex stepped forward, his voice urgent. "We need to accelerate the program. With more subjects, we could create a living, breathing example of what our species could become together." Jake recoiled. "More subjects? You mean more prisoners?" Fornax placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch both alien and comforting. "Not prisoners, Jake. Volunteers. We need to show them what's possible, what we've discovered." Before Jake could respond, the ship rocked violently. The distant sound of explosions echoed through the hull. The rescue mission had begun. "We're out of time," Jake said, moving towards the door. "I need to get back to the other prisoners before—" The chamber door slid open, revealing King Draconis flanked by a squad of elite guards. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. His partially transformed queen, the human prisoner, and the flustered scientist. "So," Draconis hissed, his voice dripping with venom, "this is the great secret you've been keeping from me, my dear wife. Consorting with the enemy, polluting our royal bloodline." Fornax stepped forward, her posture regal despite her altered appearance. "Husband, please, let me explain. What we've discovered could end this war, could elevate both our species to—" Silence! Draconis roared. He turned to his guards. Seize them all. The human fleet approaches, and I will not have traitors aboard my ship when we annihilate them. As the guards moved to comply, alarms blared once more. A new voice, tinny but unmistakably human, echoed through the ship's communication system. Attention, Saurian vessel. This is Colonel Sarah Steele of Earth's Combined Fleet. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. In the moment of distraction, Jake locked eyes with Fornax. They both knew that the next few seconds would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of both their species. With a shared nod of understanding, they prepared to act, the chaos of impending battle raging around them. Jake lunged for the nearest guard, wrestling the weapon from his grasp. In the same moment, Fornax's partially transformed body moved with lightning speed, disarming two more guards before they could react. "Stop!" Jake shouted, aiming the weapon at King Draconis. "Your Majesty, please. There's more at stake here than you realize." Draconis hissed, his eyes darting between Jake and Fornax. "You dare threaten your king?" Jake's mind raced, knowing he had mere seconds to prevent disaster. He lowered the weapon slightly, meeting Fornax's gaze. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'm not threatening," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'm proposing a solution, one that could change everything." He activated his secret comm device, sending a prearranged signal to Elena and the Resistance. Across the ship, carefully planned distractions erupted. Alarms blared in distant sectors, drawing guards away from their position. Fornax stepped forward, her transformed features a stark reminder of the changes they'd set in motion. "Husband, please listen. What we've discovered, it's unprecedented." Before Draconis could respond, Dr. Zex's voice crackled over the intercom. "Your Majesties, you must come to the lab immediately. The hybrid, it's beyond anything we imagine." Jake seized the moment of confusion. "Your Majesty, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to see for yourself what's happening. It could be the key to ending this war." Draconis' tail lashed angrily, but curiosity flickered in his reptilian eyes. "Very well," he snarled, "but at the first sign of treachery, you'll all be executed." They moved swiftly through the ship's corridors, the sounds of battle growing more intense. Jake's comm device buzzed again. A message from Elena. "Rendezvous point secure. Human rescue team encountered. Awaiting your signal." Jake's heart raced. Everything was converging faster than he'd anticipated. As they approached Dr. Zex's lab, he caught Fornax's eye. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we can't let this turn into a bloodbath." The lab doors hissed open, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Dr. Zex stood before a large incubation chamber, his eyes wide with excitement. "Behold!" he exclaimed, gesturing dramatically. Inside the chamber, a figure stirred. As they watched, a young female emerged, her body a striking blend of human and saurian features. She blinked, taking in her surroundings with startling awareness. "Impossible," Draconis breathed. Dr. Zex could barely contain himself. "We've named her Lyra. Her development, it's beyond anything in our records. The combination of human adaptability and saurian resilience has created something entirely new." Lyra's gaze settled on Jake, then Fornax. A flicker of recognition passed between them. She spoke, her voice a melodic blend of human and saurian tones. "Mother? Father?" The moment was shattered by the ship-wide comm system crackling to life. Colonel Sarah Steele's voice filled the air. "Attention, Saurian vessel. This is your final warning. Power down weapons and prepare to be boarded." Jake knew it was now or never. He turned to Fornax and Draconis. "We have a chance to stop this war before it escalates, but we have to act now." Fornax nodded, her partially transformed features set with purpose. "We need to broadcast the truth, show both sides what we've discovered." Draconis' tail lashed anxiously. "And reveal our weakness to the humans? Never." "Not weakness," Jake insisted. "Potential. A future where our species don't just coexist but thrive together." Lyra stepped forward, her movements graceful despite her newness to the world. "I am living proof of what we can become," she said. her voice carrying an otherworldly wisdom. "Let me speak to them." For a moment, the lab was silent save for the distant sounds of battle. Then Draconis nodded, almost imperceptibly. "The communication center, quickly!" They moved through the ship's corridors, a strange procession of humans, saurians, and something entirely new. Jake's resistance fighters created diversions, drawing away loyalist forces. As they neared the communications center, they encountered Colonel Steele's rescue team. Weapons were raised on both sides before Jake stepped between them. "Colonel Steele?" he said, recognizing her from mission briefings a lifetime ago. "We have a chance to end this war, but I need you to trust me." Steele's eyes narrowed, taking in the bizarre group before her. "You have 2 minutes to explain, soldier." Jake gestured to Lyra. "This is the future, a bridge between our species. We can stop the fighting, but we need your help to get a message out." Steele hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Make it count." They burst into the communications center, quickly overpowering the surprise crew. Fornax took charge, her fingers flying over the alien controls. "This will broadcast to the entire ship, the human fleet, and our high command," she said. Jake nodded, then turned to Lyra. "Are you ready?" The hybrid smiled, a gesture both familiar and alien. "I was born ready." The broadcast signal flared to life, and Lyra stepped forward. Her voice, carrying the richness of both species, filled the airwaves. "People of Earth and Saurus, I speak to you as a child of both worlds. I am proof that our species are not meant to be enemies, but allies. Together, we can achieve greatness beyond imagination." As Lyra continued, Jake watched the reactions around him. Steele's team lowered their weapons, awe replacing suspicion. Draconis' expression softened, seeing his wife's features mirrored in this new being. But they weren't out of danger yet. Alarms blared, and Jake's comm device buzzed urgently. Elena's voice came through, tight with tension. "Jake, loyalist forces are converging on your position. We can't hold them off much longer." Jake turned to the others, his mind racing. They had started something monumental, but now they needed to secure their position. The fate of 2 species hung in the balance, and the next few moments would determine whether their bold gambit would lead to peace or plunge them into an even more devastating conflict. "We need to get to the command center," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's the only way to ensure this message reaches everyone who needs to hear it." As Lyra's broadcast continued, Jake began formulating a plan. They had come too far to fail now, and he was determined to see this through to the end, whatever the cost. Cost. Jake's mind raced as he assessed their options. The communications center was secure for now, but they needed to act fast. He turned to the others, his voice low and urgent. "We need to get to the command center. It's the only way to ensure this message reaches everyone who needs to hear it." Fornax nodded, her partially transformed features set with tenacity. "Agreed, but the loyalist forces will be expecting that. We'll need to split up." As if on cue, the ship rocked violently. Alarms blared, and a new voice echoed through the ship's systems. "King Draconis," his tone infused with fury. "All loyal subjects, this is your king. The traitors have shown their true colors. Destroy the human fleet at once." Jake's blood ran cold. He locked eyes with Colonel Steele, seeing his own fear reflected in her gaze. "If those weapons fire, this whole situation goes nuclear." Fornax's tail lashed anxiously. "We need to disable the weapon systems." Jake nodded, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. "All right, here's what we do. Colonel, you and your team come with me. We'll hit the weapons control room. Fornax, you and Lyra head for the command center. Stop Draconis before he can do any more damage." As they prepared to move out, Lyra stepped forward, her hybrid features a striking blend of human and saurian. "I'm ready," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly confidence. They moved swiftly through the ship's corridors, the sounds of battle growing more intense. Jake led his team with practiced efficiency, using the knowledge he'd gained during his captivity to navigate the labyrinthine vessel. They encountered pockets of resistance, loyalist saurian troops who hadn't yet grasped the magnitude of what was happening. "Cover me!" Jake shouted as they approached a heavily guarded junction. He dove forward, rolling beneath a barrage of energy blasts. In one fluid motion, he came up firing, his borrowed Saurian weapon pulsing with deadly accuracy. 2 guards fell, and the others retreated, clearly unprepared for such a decisive human counterattack. Colonel Steele whistled low. "Damn, soldier, I see why they picked you for their program." Jake allowed himself a grim smile as they pressed forward. "Let's hope it's enough." Meanwhile, Fornax and Lyra faced their own challenges. The Queen's altered physiology, while granting her some human traits, hindered her in combat against her own species. But Lyra more than made up for it. The hybrid moved with impossible grace, her reflexes and strength far surpassing those of either parent species. As they neared the command center, a familiar figure blocked their path. Dr. Zex stood before them, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and scientific curiosity. "Fascinating," he breathed, staring at Lyra. "Simply fascinating. You must come with me, child. There's so much more to learn, to study." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "I am not your experiment, doctor." Zex lunged forward, a capture device in his hand. But Lyra was faster. She sidestepped his attack with ease, using his own momentum to send him crashing into a nearby console. The scientist crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Fornax quickly accessed the fallen doctor's datapad. This contains all the research on the hybrid program. It could be crucial for negotiations. They continued on, the sounds of conflict growing louder as they approached the command center. In the weapons control room, Jake and his team worked feverishly. The human soldiers marveled at the advanced Saurian technology, but Jake's time aboard the ship had given him crucial insights. "Here," he said, gesturing to a pulsing energy core. "If we overload this, it should short out the entire weapons grid." As they worked, the ship's internal communications crackled to life once more. King Draconis' voice filled the air, dripping with malice. "Attention, all hands! The traitors have left me no choice. Initiate self-destruct sequence. Authorization code Draconis Omega 9. Jake's heart sank. He turned to Colonel Steele, his expression grim. "Change of plans. We need to get to the command center. Now!" They raced through the ship's corridors, Jake leading the way with unerring precision. As they approached the command center, they could hear the sounds of a heated confrontation within. The doors slid open, revealing a tense standoff. King Draconis stood at the center of the room, his clawed hand hovering over the self-destruct controls. Fornax and Lyra faced him, their postures tense and ready for action. "It's over, Draconis," Fornax said, her voice carrying the authority of a queen despite her altered appearance. "Stand down." The king's eyes darted between the new arrivals and his wife. "Never," he snarled. "I'll destroy us all before I let our bloodline be polluted by these mammals." Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice a perfect blend of human and Saurian tones. "Look at me. I am the future, not a pollution, but an evolution, the strength of both our peoples, combined." For a moment, uncertainty flickered in Draconis' eyes, but then his features hardened once more. "No," he growled. "This ends now." His hand moved towards the self-destruct panel. Jake tensed, ready to spring into action. But before anyone could move, a new voice rang out. "My king, stop!" All eyes turned to see General Serpens enter the command center, his uniform disheveled but his bearing still proud. Jake blinked in surprise. He had assumed the general was still locked in the brig. Serpens stepped forward, his gaze locked on Draconis. "My king, I have seen the potential of this program. I was wrong to doubt it. Please, for the sake of our people, reconsider." Draconis hesitated, his hand still hovering over the controls. The command center fell silent, the fate of 2 species hanging in the balance. Jake held his breath, acutely aware that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of human-Saurian relations. The tension in the room was palpable, a powder keg ready to explode at the slightest spark. In that moment of hesitation, Lyra stepped forward, her hybrid features a striking blend of human and Saurian. She placed a gentle hand on Draconis' arm, her touch carrying the warmth of both species. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice a melodic fusion of human and Saurian tones, There is another way. Look at me. I am not a threat, but a promise. A future where our peoples stand united, stronger together than we ever were apart. Draconis's eyes widened, his gaze fixed on Lyra. For a heartbeat, the command center was silent, the fate of two species balanced on a knife's edge. Then slowly, the Saurian king's hand fell away from the controls. He slumped, the fight draining from his posture. I don't understand, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake stepped forward, his expression a mixture of relief and tenacity. Then let us show you, Your Majesty. Let us show everyone. In the days that followed, a historic ceasefire was announced. The human fleet stood down, and the Saurian warship's weapons remained dormant. As news of the unprecedented event spread, Jake and Queen Fornax found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The once sterile conference room aboard the Saurian warship had been hastily converted into a makeshift negotiation chamber. Jake sat beside Fornax, their shoulders nearly touching as they pored over proposed terms for a lasting peace. The cultural exchange program is crucial, Fornax said, her partially transformed features set with grit. It's the only way to truly break down the barriers between our peoples. Jake nodded, running a hand through his unkempt hair. Agreed, but we need to address the security concerns. Some of the Earth's military leaders are pushing for access to Saurian technology as a condition for peace. Fornax's tail lashed anxiously. That won't sit well with our people. Many still view humans as a threat. Their discussion was interrupted as Lyra entered the room, her movements graceful despite the tension evident in her posture. The human delegation has arrived, she announced, and there's been another incident. Jake's stomach clenched. What happened? A group of traditionalist Saurians attempted to sabotage the ship's life support systems, Lyra reported. They were stopped, but it's clear that not everyone supports these talks. Fornax's expression hardened. Draconis, she hissed. He may have stepped down, but he still has followers. Jake rose, his mind already racing with countermeasures. We need to tighten security. I'll work with General Serpens to root out any other potential saboteurs. As they prepared to greet the human delegation, Jake couldn't help but notice the way Fornax's hand brushed against his. The touch sent a jolt through him, a reminder of the complex web of emotions that had developed between them during their shared ordeal. The negotiations proved to be a delicate dance of diplomacy and compromise. Colonel Sarah Steele, now a staunch advocate for peace, presented a compelling case before both human and Saurian representatives. I've seen firsthand the potential of our two species working together, she said, her voice carrying the weight of her experiences. The hybrid program, while controversial, offers us a unique opportunity for advancement and mutual understanding. Dr. Zex, who had been surprisingly cooperative since his failed attempt to capture Lyra, stepped forward. If I may, I believe expanding the hybrid program could lead to unprecedented scientific breakthroughs. Imagine the medical advancements, the technological leaps we could achieve together. His words sparked heated debate among the delegates. Jake watched as faces twisted with anger, fear, and hope in equal measure. He caught Fornax's eye across the room, seeing his own mix of emotions reflected in her gaze. As the days stretched into weeks, progress was made in fits and starts. Small groups of humans and Saurians were allowed to visit each other's worlds under carefully controlled conditions. The results were encouraging, with many participants reporting surprising commonalities between the two species. Yet for every step forward, there seemed to be a new challenge. King Draconis's underground movement grew bolder, launching a series of attacks on the warship's critical systems. Jake found himself racing through familiar corridors, barking orders and coordinating defense efforts. We need to reroute power to the aft shields, he shouted, his fingers flying over a control panel. Beside him, a mixed team of humans and Saurians worked in perfect sync, their differences forgotten in the face of a common threat. As the attacks intensified, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. The sabotage attempts were becoming more sophisticated, more targeted. It was as if the perpetrators had intimate knowledge of the ship's systems and the negotiation schedule. Late one night, as Jake pored over security logs in his quarters, A soft knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Fornax standing there, her expression troubled. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low. "I think we have a bigger problem than we realized." Jake ushered her inside, acutely aware of the way his heart raced at her proximity. As Fornax began to share her suspicions of a mole within their inner circle, Jake found himself torn between his growing feelings for the Saurian queen and the weight of their shared responsibilities. Outside, the stars streaked by, a silent reminder of the vast universe that hung in the balance. The path to peace between humans and Saurians was fraught with challenges, but as Jake looked at Fornax, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they had already accomplished the impossible. Now they would need to do it again, navigating the treacherous waters of interspecies politics, personal relationships, and the ever-present threat of those who would see their efforts fail. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The journey ahead would test them in ways they had never imagined. The moment of calm was shattered as alarms blared throughout the warship. Jake sprang to his feet, adrenaline surging through his veins. Fornax's eyes widened, her tail lashing with sudden agitation. "It's happening," she hissed, her partially human features contorting with a mix of anger and fear. Before Jake could respond, the door to his quarters burst open. Colonel Sarah Steele rushed in, her uniform disheveled and a plasma pistol clutched in her hand. "We're under attack," she reported, her voice taut with urgency. "King Draconis has made his move. His loyalists are storming key positions across the ship." Jake's mind raced, years of military training kicking into overdrive. "We need to secure the human delegates," he said, already moving towards the door. "Fornax, can you coordinate with the loyal Saurian guards?" The queen nodded, her posture shifting to one of regal authority, despite the dire circumstances. "I'll do what I can, but my altered physiology—" "Use it to your advantage," Jake said, squeezing her shoulder. "You know this ship better than anyone. Use that knowledge." As they stepped into the corridor, chaos erupted around them. The sounds of plasma fire and shouted orders echoed through the metallic halls. Jake quickly organized a defensive perimeter around the human delegation's quarters, barking orders to a mix of human and Saurian security personnel. "Steele, take point," he commanded. "I need to get to the bridge and assess the situation." As Jake fought his way through the embattled ship, he couldn't help but marvel at the precision of Draconis' attack. The coup forces had clearly been in place for some time, their coordinated assault catching even the most vigilant defenders off guard. A blur of emotion caught Jake's eye, and he turned to see Lyra dispatching a group of Draconis loyalists with breathtaking efficiency. Her hybrid physiology allowed her to move with a grace and power that left both humans and Saurians in awe. "Lyra," Jake called out, "we need to secure the power core. If Draconis gets control of it—" "I'm on it," she replied, her voice a harmonious blend of human and Saurian tones. With a nod, she disappeared down a side corridor, leaving Jake to continue his push towards the bridge. As he fought his way forward, Jake's comm unit crackled to life. "Jake!" Fornax's voice came through, strained and breathless. "I'm trapped in the medical bay. Draconis' forces have me cornered." Jake's heart clenched. "Hold on," he urged. "I'm sending reinforcements your way. Use whatever you can to barricade yourself in." He quickly relayed orders to a nearby squad of loyal Saurians, directing them to the medical bay. As he did so, a familiar figure stumbled out of a research lab, clutching a canister of swirling green gas. "Dr. Zex?" Jake said, surprised to see the scientist in the thick of the fighting. The Saurian's eyes were wide with a mix of fear and dedication. "I've made a choice," he said, holding up the canister. "This pheromone compound, it could help subdue Draconis' forces, but I need your help to deploy it." Jake hesitated for a split second, weighing the risks, but the sound of approaching enemy forces made the decision for him. "Do it," he said. As Dr. Zex worked to release the pheromone into the ship's ventilation system, Jake's comm unit buzzed again. This time, it was a transmission from the human fleet. "This is Admiral Hawkins," a gruff voice announced. "We've detected weapons fire on the Saurian vessel, requesting situation report and permission to intervene." Jake knew the next few words could mean the difference between peace and all-out war. "Admiral," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him, "we have the situation under control. A direct military intervention could jeopardize everything we've worked for. Give us time to purpose this internally." There was a tense pause before the Admiral replied, "You have 1 hour, Jenkins. After that, we're coming in." As Jake signed off, a deafening explosion rocked the ship. Emergency klaxons wailed as the lights flickered ominously. "Jake!" Lyra's voice came through his comm, tinged with urgency. "Draconis is targeting the power core. If it goes critical—" "I know," Jake cut her off, his mind racing. "Can you stabilize it?" There was a moment of hesitation before Lyra responded. "I can, but the radiation levels are extreme. Even with my hybrid physiology, I don't know if—" "Do what you have to," Jake said, hating himself for asking her to take such a risk. "We'll buy you as much time as we can." As Lyra made her way to the power core, Jake rallied a strike team. With Dr. Zex's pheromone beginning to take effect on some of the attacking forces, they had a chance to end this once and for all. "We're taking the bridge," Jake announced, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "Draconis ends this here and now." As they fought their way towards the final confrontation, Jake could feel the weight of two species' futures resting on his shoulders. The next few moments would determine whether humans and saurians would forge a new era of cooperation or plunge into a war that could tear the galaxy apart. With a deep breath, Jake readied himself for the fight ahead. The bridge doors loomed before him, the sounds of conflict echoing from within. Everything had led to this moment. As he prepared to breach the entrance, Jake knew that whatever happened next would change the course of history forever. The bridge doors hissed open, revealing a scene of chaos. King Draconis stood at the helm, his scales gleaming with an almost manic intensity as he barked orders to his loyalists. Jake's team moved with practiced precision, plasma weapons ready. "It's over, Draconis," Jake called out, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." The Saurian King's eyes narrowed, his tail lashing with fury. "Never! I'll see this ship burn before I let humans dictate our future." What followed was a blur of motion and searing heat as plasma bolts crisscrossed the bridge. Jake ducked and rolled, his hybrid reflexes allowing him to narrowly avoid a barrage of enemy fire. He caught glimpses of his team engaging Draconis' forces, a deadly dance of human and Saurian combat styles. In the midst of the chaos, Jake's comm unit crackled to life. "Jake!" Lyra's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "The power core is stabilized. We've averted a meltdown." Relief flooded through him, but there was no time to savor it. Jake pressed forward, his eyes locked on Draconis. The Saurian King fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his claws leaving deep gouges in the metal deck. As the battle raged, Jake became aware of a shift in the air. Dr. Zex's pheromone compound was taking effect, causing confusion among some of Draconis' loyalists. Jake seized the opportunity, signaling to his team to press their advantage. With a final, coordinated assault, they overwhelmed the remaining resistance. King Draconis, his forces defeated and his coup in tatters, slumped to his knees. "It's finished," Jake said, standing over the fallen king. "Your reign of terror ends here." In the aftermath of the battle, as the ship's crew worked to restore systems and tend to the wounded, Jake found himself drawn to the medical bay. He found Fornax there, her scales bearing the marks of close combat, but her eyes shining with fierce pride. "We did it," she said softly as Jake approached. "Against the odds, we prevailed." Jake nodded, suddenly aware of the weight of the moment. They had faced death together, fought side by side, and emerged victorious. The bond between them, once unthinkable, now felt unbreakable. In the days that followed, as the immediate crisis passed and peace negotiations resumed, Jake and Fornax found themselves at the center of a new challenge. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of conflict, had become a symbol of what was possible between their species. It was Lyra who first broached the subject, her hybrid features alight with excitement as she spoke to them in a quiet corner of the ship. "Your union," she said, her voice a melodious blend of human and Saurian tones. "It could be the key to cementing this alliance, a living embodiment of cooperation between our peoples." Jake and Fornax exchanged glances, the weight of the suggestion hanging between them. They had discussed their feelings, the complex web of emotions that had developed during their shared ordeal. But this was something more. "It won't be easy," Fornax said, her tail curling around Jake's leg almost unconsciously. "There will be opposition from both sides." Jake nodded, his mind already racing with the potential challenges and opportunities. "But if we succeed," he said slowly, "we could change the course of history." The decision once made sent shockwaves through both human and saurian societies. As news of their intended union spread, debates erupted across both fleets and on distant worlds. Conservative factions railed against the idea, citing concerns about genetic compatibility and cultural preservation. Dr. Zex, now fully committed to the cause of interspecies cooperation, threw himself into addressing these concerns. He worked tirelessly in his lab, presenting evidence of the viability and potential advantages of human-saurian offspring. "Think of the possibilities," he argued before a joint council of human and saurian leaders. "The strengths of both species combined, creating individuals uniquely suited to tackle the challenges of our shared future." As preparations for the ceremony began, Jake and Fornax found themselves at the center of a diplomatic whirlwind. They attended countless meetings, made impassioned speeches, and worked to address the fears and doubts of their respective peoples. Lyra, now recovered from her heroic actions during the coup attempt, became their staunchest advocate. She embarked on a tour of both human and saurian worlds, sharing her unique perspective as a hybrid. "I am living proof of what our species can achieve together," she declared before a crowd on a saurian colony world. "My existence is not a dilution of either heritage, but a celebration of both." The day of the ceremony arrived with an air of tense anticipation. The rebuilt bridge of the saurian warship had been transformed into a space of solemn beauty, with representatives from both species gathered to witness the historic event. As Jake stood at the front of the assembly, his heart racing, he caught sight of Fornax approaching. She moved with grace, her partially human features softened with an expression of love and perseverance. In that moment, all doubts faded away. This was right. This was necessary. The ceremony began, a careful blend of human and saurian traditions. As they exchanged vows, pledging their lives and their futures to each other and to the cause of peace, Jake felt a profound sense of rightness. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. A small group of hardline saurians, still loyal to King Draconis' ideals, had attempted one final act of sabotage. They had targeted the ship's life support systems, hoping to throw the ceremony into chaos. But even as panic began to ripple through the assembled crowd, Jake saw something remarkable. Human and saurian security teams, now working in seamless coordination, sprang into action. They moved as one, their differences forgotten in the face of a common threat. Within moments, the saboteurs were apprehended and the danger was neutralized. The incident, rather than derailing the ceremony, became a powerful symbol of the new era of cooperation. As the alarms fell silent and calm was restored, Jake and Fornax turned to face each other once more. Their eyes met, a universe of understanding passing between them. Then, in a moment that would be broadcast across both human and saurian worlds, they sealed their union with a kiss. It was a kiss that bridged the gap between their physiologies and cultures, a living testament to the power of love to overcome even the most formidable barriers. As they embraced, Jake could feel the changes in his own body, the result of their intimate contact over time. His skin had taken on a slight scaling, while Fornax's once reptilian features had softened with human traits. As they parted, the assembled crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and murmurs. Jake and Fornax turned to face their people, their hands clasped tightly together. In that moment, they were no longer just individuals, but symbols of a new future, one of unity, understanding, and limitless potential. The ceremony concluded, but Jake knew that their work was nowhere near the end. The real challenge lay ahead, implementing the peace accords, fostering cooperation between their peoples, and building a future where humans and saurians could live and work together in harmony. As they stepped down from the podium, ready to greet the assembled dignitaries, Jake squeezed Fornax's hand. She returned the gesture, her eyes shining with perseverance and hope. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their love for each other and their shared vision of a peaceful future.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.